how's it going? So today I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into how I'm preparing my live setup, because in that last video I talked about my live set. I knew it was going to change a little bit, and it has. So today I wanted to dive a bit deeper into the Octatrack, since in that video things have changed a bit, but I also just kind of glanced over like a quick rundown of how things are. So today I wanted to focus more on the Octatrack and how I'm getting my stems prepped for the Octatrack, how the stems are going to be laid out on the Octatrack, and I feel like I have also cracked the code on parts and how they are beneficial for me when using the Octatrack in a live kind of DAWLESS setup. And shout out to Strange Strains Mario for putting me onto parts. Link to his music down below. I really appreciate it, bro. And also, by the way, today's video is sponsored by Tracklib, but more on them later. Okay, so here's a song that I have in Ableton. This is a track I made called Sick House. I'm not gonna lie, if you look at all these things, they're all probably, this is sick, sick house, that was sick. It's like I am the worst at naming tracks. But anyway, this is this track that I want to play live, right? Right, there's a couple parts in here, some stuff I'm gonna skip, some stuff I wanna recreate. So what I want to recreate are the drums, of course. I'm going to be doing that on the Digitact, but I want to take the chords, the bass, and the little lead line as stems that I can put on the Octatrack and rearrange them and play them back. So I've gone and used the Bounce in Place plugin, which is great, but another way of doing this, for example, if we go and listen to this here, which is a sampler, or a simpler, I should say, all you have to do is like open up a new audio track and say, listen to what audio. It's going to be this right here, the 21 wave hit. It might be called something different on your thing. I'm pretty sure, willing to bet money on it, that it would be. And then you just record the audio of that. Set this to off so that there's no latency. And once you go in and you kind of solo this and it's recording some of the audio, right? That's what we've done down here. This is actually really important. The Octatrack has time stretching, and it works really well if you just give it set loops. So you can see here that I have this little tail end. I went ahead and just highlight that, cut that off, and then the most important thing next is once you've highlighted this little section here that happens to be 2 bars, hit Command and J, or you can right click and just hit Consolidate. And that will just kind of bounce it down and render it as a new clip. Think of it as truncating the sample into exactly 2 bars. So this is where you would go and do this for all of your sounds. I went ahead and did that for all of my sounds, so this wouldn't be too boring. But the next important thing you need to get, well, it's not that important. But this here, this is a CF card reader. And the reason I'm using like an external one, this is by Ugreen. I have a link to it down below. It's a trick-ish, sort of, that I kind of learned from my MPC 1000. You probably won't be able to see that at all. But you can put the MPC 1000 as well as the Octatrack in like a USB disk mode, but it's super duper slow when transferring files. So what I end up doing on the Octatrack, similarly to the MPC, turn it off, pop the card out, and just plug it into a CFast reader or a CF card reader. And the reason I like doing this is because I can go, I mean, you could do this either way, right? So if I go to the Octatrack CF card, I can go to my audio, and then I can go to my Octatrack song parts, and I can create a new one, which is called Wave House. That's going to be this song here, Wave House, right? Sick house, wave stuff. So there's one sound that I did not grab yet, which is going to be from these drums. So check this out. I recorded these drums. This is just going to be like a percussion top loop thing. It sounds crazy, I know, but with other drums, I think it'll sound kind of cool. And again, I need to make sure I cut that part off, select this, Command J, and now with this done, I can drag and drop. While I'm holding it, I'm going to hit Command and Tab, jump back over to my Finder, and just drop it in. And now it's on the Octatrack CF card. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Wave Perk Top. Done. Export that. So now all I need to do is take this back out, put it right here into the Octatrack, And once this is done booting up, we'll be able to lay down our stems. And while we wait for this, which is fairly quick, I'll be honest, let me give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, Tracklib. Royalty fair, not royalty free. That's what Tracklib has been pushing, and I think it's amazing. I've been using Tracklib for a long time now, and what they're able to provide me is a place where I can go to find real music from real artists and sample that music and release my tracks without having to worry about getting my samples cleared. They handle all the legality and the legal sides of all of that stuff for me. Another fun way to think about it is Tracklib is kind of like an online record store where you'll find music from 1928 all the way to today from across the globe hitting all genres. The way it works is you pay a small monthly fee to be able to download tracks and sample them. And then when you're ready to release a track, depending on the licensing category of that song and how much of that song you used, you'll pay a one-time licensing fee and split royalties on that track that you sampled with the original artist going forward. What a cool way to give back to artists that have inspired us, especially inspired me by letting me sample their music without worries of getting my tracks pulled from, all the streaming services out there. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, use the link down below to get an extra 15 track downloads to start your 30-day free trial, which you can cancel anytime. All right, let's get back into it. Okay, so here I'm gonna go to Bank 2 and Pattern 13. In Pattern 13, we're gonna be set up in Part 4. I'll explain parts after this, so you don't have to go into Part 4 on your machine, but it will make even more sense later. But right now we're in Part 4, and what I'm gonna do is I love using just the static tracks. I don't need to go into flex tracks because I'm not doing anything that crazy with my stem playback. So I'm gonna live in the static tracks, and this is gonna pull directly off of the CF card and not take up RAM within the Octatrack. I'll find a blank slot, hit right, go to the proper folder, Wave House, and here we go. We have all our stems that we are not hearing because I have one of these tracks muted. Okay, so like I said, we got all our stems here, the bass line, the chord, this little peak sample, as well as that percussion-y top. The way I lay out my stems is basically the chord progression or the sample chop. Basically the meat of the track is always going to be track 1, then bass, then percussion stuff, and then this is kind of the auxiliary track. It's usually vocals or like another like synthesizer lead part. So I'm going to go ahead and choose our chords to be here on track 1, and then I'm going to load up our bass. I'm also going to load up the percussion top, and I'll load up the peaks. So now jump over to track 2. We'll set this to be our wave bass, wave percussion, track 3, wave peak. Okay, so we've assigned those 4 tracks to do our things. Track 5 is always going to be my through track for my drums. 6 is going to be a through track for peak, which is the synthesizer I'm going to be taking live. 7 and 8. 8's kind of the master for now. 7, I don't know. I'll figure out something / you don't need to use it all, right? So we go back to our chord progression, push this here at the beginning. And now we got our chords playing back. And if we go to source, I have time stretch set to auto, loop set to auto, which I'm gonna set to off. Reason being, this is super, super duper important. One thing that gets kind of funky on the Octatrack is when you have a stem set to loop and then you change patterns, what might end up happening, let's see if we can get it to do it right now. Okay, so I'm gonna set this sample to loop. We'll press play, and I'm gonna jump to pattern 14. And on pattern 14, I haven't touched it, right? There's nothing here, but let's see if the sample keeps playing. It keeps playing. Our parts have changed. There's no triggers down here. It's a 1-bar loop, but the sample will just keep on going. This has been kind of like the bane of my existence in a way when preparing these live sets. And I used to do this thing where on the next pattern, I would set up a trigless trigger and set the amp volume down to nothing, right? And this would turn off the volume of this track and this one specific spot. And this was kind of annoying because it wouldn't really work that well. So this didn't work for me. But what did work was after having a good chat with EasyBot, we kind of came to the same conclusion that if you hold down this step, we're back on pattern 13 now. If I hold down this step, we want this to play for 4 bars. In our amp page, I'm going to set the release all the way down to 0 or maybe even 2, right? Something really soft. But our hold, this needs to be set to the specific step length of what I want this sample to be held for. So in this case, 64 steps. So when this gets triggered, it's going to hold the gate open, or the VCA wide open of the sample, and let it play for 64 steps. So no matter what I do, when I change to another pattern, it will automatically stop for me. So now that I have this here in this pattern, I'm going to go ahead and copy this pattern, go to the next pattern, paste this pattern here. That step's already there, and now I can introduce our bass. Same thing here, I can either hold this step, or a faster way of doing this is just make sure you have this set to 64 steps. So every trigger that gets placed in here applies to that. If you want to be a little more safe, you can lock it in, but I think we're good here. And I'm also going to turn our release down again. Same thing, copy this, go to the next pattern, paste it here, get our little wave top sound here. And you know what, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the peak part here as well. So let's see what this sounds like coming back around. Cool. This has some. See, this one's slowly fading out. If we mute these and we listen to this one here, that's because our hold and our release are there. I'm going to turn our hold up just to 64, release down a little bit just for this specific step. There it is. And again, we don't hear the digitack just yet. That's because on track 5, I have not set a through track trigger to open up the VCA. But up until this point, all the other tracks have that, so that track will most likely be open. But again, you never know. Just to be safe, let's go ahead and place them in there. Cool. This is a wrong pattern. Here, we'll just jump to this pattern. Let's see what this one is. Sure, that works, right? Next pattern. Kind of works, right? Let's see what this pattern is. All right, you get the idea. Basically, that's how I'm gonna lay down my stems. I'll fine tune them, I'll mix them a little more with the amp and the volume. I don't do the track levels. Don't know why, I'm more of an amp volume type of person. And that's basically it, right? I got the stems going, I got my through track going. I'll mix this a little bit more, massage it a bit, kind of do some more EQing, like for example, in this little hi-hatty percussion sound, I might want this to be even further, kind of shaved off a bit. More just like a textural type of thing, right? Kind of chilling in the back. And with that, let's see what we got in here. Right, and then this sound here, I'll go here and just kind of turn either the amp volume down, right, or the track level. And this is where I guess parts kind of come into play. So you get the idea. Stems are laid out. That's how I get the stems in here. Now, parts. Parts are crazy. Similarly to my MPC 4000, which had multis, I eventually cracked the code on those and it changed my life. Parts have now changed my live sets forever, my live sets. So what parts will allow me to do, in a nutshell, is have 4 different songs within a single bank. If you come from the digitact world, you're probably wondering, why is that cool? Because you could already do that. On the digitact, every pattern is independent from one another. But on the Octatrack, all the patterns live within a bank and the banks are independent from one another. But the patterns can be assigned to a specific part. And within each bank, there are 4 parts. So let's put this to practice. If I go to bank 1, pattern 1, bank 1, pattern 1 here, and I press play. Cool, right? But if I go to pattern 5, completely different song, right? Same thing here. I can go to pattern 5, Or let's go to pattern 9, right? Or pattern 13. Let's see what lives here. See what's happening here? So I guess the way to explain this as a benefit was prior to this, I used to only limit myself to essentially 16 songs per live set because I only had 16 banks, and that was the only wall separating those songs from one another and those samples from playing on top of each other and like robbing voices and not having to parameter lock everything, right? 16 banks meant 16 songs because they were all independent from one another. But now within a bank, you have 4 parts. Well, not now in my brain, because I just figured this out. So let's say bank 2, pattern 1, PT1, part 1 is going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then part 2, part 3, part 4. So this gives me 4 songs in groups of 4 patterns. It doesn't have to be 4 patterns. I'm just trying to give myself some sort of a pattern to recognize, right? But I'm giving myself 4 different sections of each song using the parts, and the parts are independent per pattern. So if I'm here and I'm playing this, this is part 1, bank 2. But if I jump here, this is part 2, bank 2. And if I jump here, this is going to be part 3, bank 2. Watch, see the PT? It changes. And then we'll go to the song we just added, which is part 4. Parts are crazy. Helpful hint here, let's go to bank 3. Once you get to a part, I find it best to kind of go and copy paste the part from the previous bank. So we'll say we're here, we'll hit part, we'll highlight 4, function, copy part 4. Go to bank 3, pattern 1, part 1, paste. Oh, my bad. You got to highlight it. There we go. Paste on part 1. So I just pasted that same thing. What parts enable or what parts have are all the same samples. The engines are going to be set up the same as whatever part you previously copied and pasted. And when you change parts, all I'm doing is changing what samples are currently on those machines or those engines or those tracks, whatever you want to call them. So same thing, if I were to go here and just place the same trigger on all these, it would end up playing the same track that we just had. But you can hear that the pattern's completely different. So I can rearrange new patterns using new parts, which are playing new samples, aka new songs. So same thing here. Now I can go in and freely change up whatever samples live on these tracks. I feel like I'm repeating myself a million times because I'm still trying to fully explain it to myself, right? And that's when you best learn something. But I hope it's making sense that parts are not as intimidating as I once thought they were. Because if I go to pattern 3 now, I can choose a new part. I used to use this backwards because I used to say, why would I need parts when I already have all my patterns laid out? Why the heck would I just jump to some random setup of samples and not have it work with whatever pattern? But I was doing it backwards. I was creating the pattern before I changed the part. But now, if I go to our parts and I say copy part 1 onto part 2, now I go in here and I find, let's say, I don't know, some random sample. Let's say, sure, we'll find this. And I put this here. And then I go and I create something out of this. Right, I'll say, cool, I'll grab the start point here and a start point here. Copy and paste. Right, track 5, since it's copied from part 4, is still our through track. I just need to put a little thing here. Right? So I used to be like, cool, this is a cool pattern, but why in the world would I go and just select part 1? Like, who would do this, right? I was thinking of it backwards. You could do this. It's not bad. Create art however you want. But this isn't what I would be doing. What I would be doing would be picking my parts first, and And then when I change patterns, it would change songs for me. So I hope that makes sense. Another final quick tip I would say is create your part the way your live set is going to be. I got these as my 4 static tracks. My through track, you can see I already need to go and change this through track again on track 6 to be, let's say, a through, and then it's going to also be CD, volume all the way up, right? And then once I have that set, now I can just say copy this part and paste it on 3, paste it on 4, go to my next bank, and then pattern 1, and then I'll paste it here, paste it there, paste it here, paste it there. So now I'm building this live set with the same sort of setup all through and through. So a lot of the parts don't change too drastically, but it allows me to swap the samples. Another thing to note is that your scenes are also per part. So set up your scenes first before you start copy pasting all your parts. Otherwise you're gonna have to go back and do them all. And same with your effects. Be wary that when you change parts, your effects are gonna change. So if you have a really long delay, you jump to the next pattern, that might whip back, or your reverb might swell up and stuff. But yeah, I hope you learned something here today. I feel like I kind of did, and also kind of confused myself at the same time. But this is kind of like an ongoing documenting process of the live set. But so far, it's been coming along pretty good, and I'll leave you on one of my favorite tracks from my live set. This is called Your Love. I made this back in 2018 on the MPC 4000, and it's kind of lived in little parts here and there. But yeah, you're more than welcome to kick it. I appreciate you, my friend. And until next week, you already know the drill. Share the love, share the knowledge. Knowledge is power. Peace. So this is where the track starts, right? Then I got pattern 2. Kind of pick up the tempo a little bit. A lot of this is also going to be mapped to a Launch Control XL, so I'll have control over things like this. I'm going to pretty much start with the filter down on almost all the tracks. Bring in the bass part. Little vocal part in there. Right, and if I were to mute the drums, this is just the 3 stems that I have from the MPC 4000. And I redid all the drums on the Digitact. Next part. Whoa, 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 whoa. This part's important. I need to go from this pattern here. This is like the big dramatic part, right? Which I love. I'm gonna go to pattern 15, pattern 15. And on this pattern 15, I want all these parts to be out. So it does this really long, drawn out, trippy thing. And what's funny is this stem is 128 steps, not 64. If we go and look at it, I've actually put a trig condition to play on the first time around out of every 2. So my 64 steps turns into 128 steps. Now we can say, and I even went back and redid the bass line on the grandmother because I wanted it to just be pumping. Then bring it all in. Ah. Yes, I love this. Anyway, appreciate y'all. Peace.